Hi guys, so this is the second video that I talked about in the first video, just regarding objection handling. And in the first video we talked about is it objection, is it information, is it a plea for clarity and all that sort of good stuff. This is just a little bit more about the process and the kind of flow that it follows. So with objections, they tend to follow a similar pattern. So if this is your sales process, this is the start, this is the end, this is how we'd love it to go, a nice straight line from A to B. But things like objections come along and they can either enhance the process or they can frustrate the process. And for a lot of salespeople, it tends to frustrate the process. And that's largely because A, they don't want them, and B, they don't know how to handle them, and finally C, they don't know how to interpret them. But if this is your sales process, the first objections, if it's a cold outreach especially, the first things that you tend to get really early on are probably false objections. The best thing they've come up with to get you out of the door or off of the phone. These are then followed by early objections. Now, while these false objections are not normally based on any truth or reality, early objections, they're not difficult to get past, but they do have some sort of thread of reality locked into them. So whilst we can breeze past this first one, the second one we might have to do a little bit more for. As we work through this, and there's 5 objections in an average sale, we need to think, okay, 5 objections, but if everything's not an objection, then do I need to take everything on, or what should I do with it? So after this, if we start to get into the correct ego state, we start to have a conversation, then the things that come along a little bit further down the line are not all necessarily objections. This could be a question, this could be information, this could be a plea for clarity before they move any further, because they want to make sure it can do certain things, handle certain things, or help them in certain ways. And then as we move down the process, the ones that I fear the most of all are the late objections, the distance objections, the ones that are literally there to stop you from getting that deal over the line in that moment. And these are the ones that you have to really understand before you walk out that door or put the phone down. You can't just jump on the Hopper bus and press the bell with this. You need to understand why that's there. So if this is your process, there's a couple of ways that this can go. Now, pilots use something called a 160 rule, which I quite like. And I think it relates quite well to a sales process. So what a pilot says is, if I set off from my starting position and I take off and I am 1 degree off course, yeah, so I'm 1 degree off course, that's not going to make any difference really at all at this moment in time. I can even travel a little bit with 1 degree off course and it's still not going to make a lot of difference. But at some point you'll reach a stage where it will. And for a pilot, what a pilot says, if I carry on and fly for 1 hour from a 1 degree offset that I don't correct, at some point, 1 hour in, I'm going to be about 60 miles off course. And it's exactly the same with the sales process. If you set off just driving your agenda and you try and just handle all these objections and you're being a little bit too pushy, a bit too aggressive, a bit too assertive rather than being understanding and empathetic, then you're going off in this direction. They're not even following the line you would hope, because they're creating distance away from you because they don't like what you're doing. So you end up being double the distance away, which is really hard to come back from. Now, when it comes to objections and your sales process, you need to learn to use those objections as one of the 2 main ways that you stay on track. So the 2 main ways that you stay on track is, number 1, great questions. Asking great questions as you move along here means you can constantly bring yourself a little bit closer to the process that you want to follow. And sometimes bring them a little bit closer to the process that you want them to follow from where they are. Because your process isn't going to go straight, it's going to wobble a little bit, and sometimes you'll be up and sometimes you'll be down. But ultimately, when you get to the end, what you need to be is at least in the same airport. You know, if you're in the same airport, you've got a good chance of getting that deal over the line. So ask great questions. The other thing is, use the objections to understand where you are in their buying process, which means you understand where you are in your sales process, which means you can use that information to create great questions or great logic in that person's mind to bring them back to the table and back to where you want to be. I hope that kind of makes sense. It's just a really quick sort of demonstration of of how I see objections flowing through a standard sales process. So if you like this, you want to talk about it anymore, feel free to DM me, give me a shout. If you'd like a free in-person demonstration for your sales team, then drop me a DM, drop me an email, info@andyscotttrainingsolutions.com, and I would love to have a chat with you. All right, see you soon, guys. Happy hunting.